Mayor Nutter has this book, Mayor, the Best Job in Politics. I highly suggest you read it. So let's talk about some parts of it. So,
Yeah.
well, let me start. Why is mayor the best job?
I think being mayor is the best job in politics because you can actually impact people's lives in a very direct way. I think in many instances, uh, we almost kind of take for granted the things that happen in the city. You wake up in the morning, you turn on the faucet, water comes out. Well, that's your water department. You go outside, streets and roadway hopefully are in decent repair. That's the streets department. The traffic signals work. That's the street traffic division. You call 911, a professional police officer, firefighter, first responder is going to show up. That's those folks. And so in the course of the day, public employees are in and out of our lives. Sometimes we don't even really think about it because it's become such the norm. But how you deploy people, how you utilize the budget, the focus, the direction, the commitment, the strategy, the planning that you do as mayor with your team and with your legislative body can determine the direction of the city. Is crime up? Is crime down? Do we have jobs? Do we not have jobs? Are kids getting a good education or not? All of these factors come into play when you're the mayor, and you can see the actual impact of your work pretty much in real time, unlike any other political job. It's a big place. Then you have an independent school district that now the mayor is pretty much directly responsible for. During my time, the state had actually taken over the school district before I became the mayor, and we had a school reform commission, 5 members, 3 appointed by the governor, 2 by the mayor. And pretty much every third or fourth grader knows that 3 is greater than 2. So, you have to deal with the reality of those numbers.
So you were somewhat limited in terms of what you could do in terms of education
You know,
reform.
I would say to some extent, but that was, for me, that was never an excuse. Those are my kids. I pick up their parents' trash. I felt I should have something to say about the quality of their children's education. And so I worked in partnership with those appointees from the governor. They were mostly all Philadelphians. I knew them anyway. And we just figured out how to get stuff done.
What do you think? What was your training to take on such a massive role? Like, what do you think helped prepare you to be so successful in that?
Well, I've often said I think part of the best training I ever received was that I used to work in a nightclub, and where I shook a lot of hands, had to remember a lot of names and faces, and from time to time had to throw people out of the club. When I became mayor, I shook a lot of hands, I had to remember a lot of faces and names, and sometimes I had to throw people out of my office. So it was some of the best training. But beyond that, it was my time in city council. It was paying attention to mayors through the years, whether it was, Mayor Green, Mayor Good, Mayor Rendell, Mayor Street, all those mayors before me, and really trying to become a student of the government and understand how it really operated and functioned. Even though I was in city council, I was always interested in what was going on over in the executive branch of the government, way before I even thought about becoming mayor.
It's interesting you talk about that journey of even while being a city councilor, still continuing to learn about legislation and different responsibilities. One thing I see is, especially the younger generation, of less enthusiasm or engagement in the political process. Is this something that you see, and what do you think we can do about it?
I'm pretty concerned about it. We talk a lot at the national level about, concerns about the future of democracy. Is democracy waning? I mean, those are very, very important issues. But I think at the local level, uh, if people aren't voting, it's also a sign that they've either given up hope or they're not seeing the benefit of having voted in the past, or they're not seeing their elected officials working on the kinds of issues that they care about. And when people have lost a sense of hope, then they're disengaged. That's where you start to see decline in neighborhoods. So it's really important, especially for local elected officials, to be out in community, giving people not only a sense of hope, but also productivity, that they can actually see what their tax dollars are going for and what they're doing on a day-to-day basis.
I remember you once said that mayor's work is truly in the streets, not in City Hall.
Yeah,
talking to people.
yeah. I mean, that's where my office was, but the real work was getting done out in the streets. You have to want to be out with people, be around people, and look, I'm not saying that everybody's going to be happy with you. My mother wasn't always happy with me, but you got to do your job. It's not a popularity contest, and it's really not about you. It's about doing the job that you were elected to do. Can't make everybody happy, but you make your best judgment. Sometimes it's going to work, sometimes it won't. Don't make that mistake again. Try something else.
Mhm. I'd like to talk about in one chapter of the book, you talk about specifically, when you ran for mayor the first time, you had a whole platform around um, combating violent crime or reducing violent crime. Can you talk about how that played a role when you first assumed office,
Sure.
and how did you kind of approach that, and how did you learn from it?
Well, first, it was very personal for me. Growing up as a kid in West Philadelphia, I saw the impact of violence in our community. Uh, 60s and 70s were periods of significant gang war activity. Uh, I know friends who were injured. I know people who were killed. My best friend, in a different situation, was shot in the face with a pellet rifle, and I went to the hospital to see him, and saw the doctors literally taking pellets out of his face. So I learned as a teenager the impact that violent behavior, violent activity, and crime could have on communities. So I brought that with me into the mayor's office. When you look at, talk to people, you see the numbers. As a black man from West Philadelphia, when I'm looking at 80% homicide victims, 80 to 85% are African American, 75% are black men. I know I have a responsibility to try to do something about that. Fortunately, I had a really great police commissioner, Chuck Ramsey, who I think energized our troops. We redeployed officers. We used technology. We used old school foot leather and put officers on the beat, on the bikes, and a variety of other strategies to send a message, which I sent at the first inauguration, a direct message to the criminal element. We are coming for you. We're not playing around. We're taking the city back, and you are not going to be able to just do whatever you want. And I think some people heard that message. We worked very closely with our returning citizen population, trying to help people who made a mistake in life or whatever happened, have a previous criminal record. Some people want to turn their lives around. And so working with employers, providing incentives, encouraging folks to get jobs. People who are working don't have time to be out in the streets causing havoc and mayhem because they have a job and they have something to do. So we used getting jobs for returning citizens as a part of a crime reduction strategy. It worked.
And we saw that in your term, right? With homicides dropping more
Homicides
than
and shootings
30%,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um,
I wanted more, but I mean that's what we got, and the numbers were significant.
Certainly impressive. And when you look today, across the US, but also in Philadelphia, we've seen crime resurge. We saw that Philadelphia had more than 500 homicides the last
2 years in a row.
2 years in a row.
Yeah.
Um, what's going on? Is
Well, I think it's a combination of things. One, we know that many major cities, medium and large cities across the country, in the midst of the pandemic, certainly saw uh, gun violence and major crimes going up. I think sociologists and criminologists are still trying to figure out what that really was all about, the disconnection that people were feeling, the isolation, et cetera. But we cannot get away from the fact that access to weapons, the proliferation of weapons all across the United States of America. For some children, it is actually easier to get a gun than to get a book or to buy one. And so we have to deal with that aspect of it. But I think beyond that, in some of our cities, maybe there's been a lessening of focus on public safety. We have also the issue of, some of the new prosecutors in an effort to,
right.
they're against mass incarceration. I'm against mass incarceration. I'm also against mass violence. right? And so if you commit a crime, if you decide to pick up that gun, shoot somebody, kill somebody, stab somebody with a knife, rape, a variety of other crimes, you have to pay a penalty for that. I'm sorry that, we may have failed you in a number of other areas throughout the course of your life. But in that moment, you made a decision to take that particular action. And so now it is incumbent upon me to take an action as it relates to you. Everyone who commits a crime doesn't necessarily have to go to jail, but everyone who commits a crime has to pay a penalty and know that there's a consequence for their actions because they made that decision.
Now tell me about, I saw that you were taken to court by the NRA. Can you
Yeah,
tell us about
early in my first term, within about a month coming into office, we put forward a number of pieces of legislation to try to deal with lost and stolen weapons, registering weapons, et cetera. There were like 5 bills. And on my 100th day in office, I was sued by the NRA, which for me is one of the proudest moments of my entire political career. No better opponent to have than the NRA, the merchants of death. They defend people who, mass murderers, use weapons of war, the AR-15s, the high capacity magazines. There's no reason for any civilian to have a weapon like that, and they defend that kind of activity. I'm trying to prevent loss of life, and they clearly don't care what happens on the streets, and they want to hide behind the Second Amendment. I'm a strong believer in the Second Amendment. I just also believe I have a First Amendment right not to be shot. And so, the Second Amendment was created at a time where you had to hand load a musket with gunpowder, right? No one's talking about AR-15s. We apparently have some ability to ban weapons. You can't have a bazooka. You can't have a machine gun. There are a whole host of weapons that you can't have. And no one says anything. You can't take a weapon into the Capitol. Interesting. The same people who don't want to protect us from all of these weapons have specific rules and regulations designed to protect them when they're at work, but not the rest of us when we're at work.
And this is something you've continued after your tenure as mayor.
Oh,
You
yeah.
continue
Now
to be
I'm
involved
serious.
in,
I'm
right?
serious about this. Every town, which used to be Mayors Against Illegal Guns, created by Mike Bloomberg and Mayor Menino, who's the mayor of Boston. These organizations are critically important to the issue of gun safety and proper gun reform. Again, no one's trying to take people's weapons, but there are just certain weapons that people should not have. There's certain individuals have mental health challenges or domestic abusers or others should not have access to weapons. We know that there are organizations like Sandy Hook Promise. I'm on their board. There are programs to try to identify folks who are struggling, who have an issue. Every time we have one of these mass shootings, unfortunately, we subsequently find this person had been reported, person had possibly been arrested before and let go. There were all kinds of signs and signals that were missed. They're writing, manifestos.
Yeah.
They got all kinds of stuff. They have all kinds of stuff on social media. All of that existed before they did what they did, but we didn't see it all to possibly prevent it.
And how do you see, especially Pennsylvania is a purple state.
Very purple.
You have red states where you have cities. How can mayors tackle this? Because we have a proliferation of illegal guns,
Right. Ghost guns.
ghost
3D
guns. So what do you think that's in the toolkit now for mayors to do something when they're blocked in a lot of ways from statewide
Well,
legislation?
first of all, citizens have the power in their hands. They have the power at least twice a year, and they have their own voices the other 363 days of the year. If you don't like what's going on, you need to get out and vote. You need to vote for people who share your interests. There's not one person in office today who put themselves in office. They all got elected, right? They didn't just show up to the State House. They didn't just show up to City Hall or the Congress and say, hey, I'm going to sit in this seat today, right? They got elected by somebody. And some days people get elected because a bunch of folks came out for them. And some people get elected because hardly anybody showed up for the other side. So you get more votes than anybody else. That's our system. except presidency. That's a whole other story. And so if you want change in politics, you have to vote. You have to vote for the change that you want.
Mm. Now let's talk about in your book, another chapter. You talk about um, you talk about the economic development and your initiatives there. You assumed office at the time of
Yeah.
Great Recession.
Timing wasn't great.
So how were you able
Don't ask me to
to?
pick a lottery ticket. Yeah.
How were you able to turn that around
Yeah.
and really make Philly robust economically?
Well, there were a couple things. I mean, you know, even recession notwithstanding, I mean, you're not going to just close up shop and say, hey, we'll come back when things get better. People have projects in the pipeline, projects underway, or, you know, making future plans. So you create an environment where you try to make it easier for people to do business. You want to make sure that capital is still flowing. Projects that can happen, you do everything you can to make sure that they're still moving forward, even in a recession. But we also did things like, which, you know, might make your eyes glaze over, but we revamped our zoning code, right? So that you could actually read it and not have to hire a $600 hour lawyer, or take you forever and get to pass the project down to your kids, because it takes so long bureaucratically to get things done. So, while at the same time, protecting community interests, you know, every project is not a great project. And, you know, people have a right to be able to exercise their views about what's going on in their neighborhood as well. But what I tried to do is create a business-friendly environment. When the recession started to wane, we restarted our business tax reduction program. We're very pro-business administration. It's about jobs. It's about putting people to work. It's about creating, broadening a tax base so that you're not raising people's taxes. You can either keep them stable or continue to roll them back. And so the more people working, the better off we are. Property values go up. People are living in more vibrant communities. We have jobs. We like jobs. You know, we have some folks out here today. You know, they love jobs. They just hate businesses, and don't seem to understand that those ideas are in conflict with each other. And you know, at the same time, you have to hold businesses accountable for what they're doing, how they're behaving, how they're performing, how they're treating their employees. Talk about issues of minimum wage or family sustaining wage, and you know where we have those opportunities, we want to support those issues as well. So you know it's hard to run a city and be antagonistic to the business community, who you then want to pay taxes and create jobs and economic vitality. So you know the mayor has to walk that balance and be able to demonstrate the ability to get things done. So second term, the recession is starting to wane. People are wanting to make investment. There was a ton of money still sitting on the sidelines. People wanted to invest, and they saw that we were going to help them get their projects going. And so the second term really kind of went gangbusters in terms of economic growth. And we had a great second term.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's interesting you talk about that balance, because I feel we're in a current political climate where people feel like they have to choose sides. It's either workers or businesses.
Yeah.
It's either,
That's a false choice.
yeah.
That's a false choice. Part of the problem is some people like to play all or nothing. When you play all or nothing, there are a lot of times you end up with nothing, right? And compromise is not a bad word. Compromise is the pathway to getting stuff done. If you have to get 100% all the time, you're not going to be particularly successful. My view was, I'm going to get as much as I can get today. That might only be 80%, whether it's from a developer or my city council or whatever the case may be. I'm going to take the 80, declare victory, and remind folks I am coming back for the other 20 sometime soon, right? So we're not done, but I'm going to take the 80 today, right? Can't let the perfect be the enemy.
Now let me, you had mentioned about the particular situation when you assumed office with the Board of Ed and, you know, the state being, even in spite of that, you know, Philadelphia schools saw a substantial increase in graduation rates.
Yeah.
What was your approach on, you know, public education? How did you, what type of efforts did you use? And then today, what do you see kind of tools that mayors can use?
Well, it's interesting. Many of my advisors at the time on the issue of public education, since the mayor wasn't directly in charge,
Mm.
pretty much everybody said, don't go near that. If you're lucky, you only have 8 years because we have a two consecutive term limit.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to fix it. And you touch it, you own it, and you're just going to get a whole bunch of blame for it. My response was, hey, I appreciate that. I'm not letting 8 years of school children's lives and the economic vitality and growth of the city sit on the sidelines just because I might get political flack for getting engaged and involved. Those are my kids. They are our future, and I'm going to be directly involved in those activities. So from working with the superintendent very closely, meeting with the School Reform Commission on a regular basis, letting them know through either directly from me or my chief education officer, we are with you. We're 6 blocks down the street. We have to be tied at the hip in a coordinated effort, focused on making sure young people are reading on grade level by 3rd grade, that they're transitioning well from whether it's K to 5 in the middle school into high school, and actually staying in high school and graduating and going on to post-secondary educational opportunity, whatever that might be. And so part of it was just really having a focus on education, claiming it, owning it as a part of the mayoral duty and responsibility. People are not reading the home rule charter. They're not reading the state statute. You're the mayor. It's education. You must be in charge, right? I'm not, no. Actually, if you read, Section A, Part B, it's, it's the governor and it's the legislature. Nobody's trying to hear that, right? You're the mayor. You're here. You're the closest one to us. We can put a token in the bus thing and come see you at City Hall. We're not going to Harrisburg, right? So you have to take that responsibility.
Yeah.
And own it.
Sometimes, that comes with the territory.
Can't make everybody happy.
So last question,
Yeah.
Mayor Nutter, for, talking about students in school, what advice do you have for today's youth?
Stay in school. Do your homework. Do your lessons. And, the craziest thing is, when I was a kid, which was a long, long time ago, my parents were able to purchase a number of the volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Now, anyone listening to this, if you're of a certain age, you can Google that and find out what that is. But older people know, right? And that's where you found information. They have these new things out that you can let your friends know where you got some ice cream last night. You can send messages. You can do, Facebook, TikTok, this, that, and the other thing, X, Twitter, whatever it's called today. It's possibly one of the most powerful tools created. And by the way, which is never advertised, you can actually talk on that thing because it's a phone, which is never advertised. They just tell you about all the apps and the 17 cameras that they have on this device, but you can get information. We have access. Young people today have more access to more information than at any time in the history of the universe. Let's use it for good. Beyond the ice cream cone and where you had dinner last night, you can get knowledge and information. And I want to encourage young people to take advantage of this information age. Things that you all grew up with that I still don't necessarily understand. When in Philly, when we used to talk about AI, we were talking about Allen Iverson, right? Now we're talking about a whole different thing, which I'm still trying to understand.
Yeah, I remember that.
So it's the world is changing. It's their time. They have so much potential and future ahead of them, and you just have to take advantage of it.
Have you used ChatGPT?
I have not. I still don't even know where to get it.
There's still hope.
Right. Well, I need to learn before school starts next week, so I can talk with my students about it.
All right. Well, thank you, Mayor Nutter. I
Thank you.
appreciate you.
Appreciate it. No
Spending the
question.
time. Thank you.